This is The Scoop for Friday.
I'm Josh Holton with the WMNF News headlines. A divided federal appeals court yesterday sided with abortion opponents and ruled a Clearwater ordinance creating a buffer zone outside an abortion clinic violates First Amendment rights. A panel of the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in a 2-1 decision ordered a district judge to issue a preliminary injunction to block the ordinance, which was approved in 2023 for an area outside Bread and Roses Women's Health Center. The ordinance barred pedestrians in a driveway entrance to the clinic and on 5 feet of sidewalk on each side of the driveway. Yesterday's 28-page majority opinion said that it prevented abortion opponents from giving leaflets to people entering the clinic in violation of the First Amendment. The group Florida Preborn Rescue and 4 individual plaintiffs described the sidewalk counselors challenging the ordinance. The majority opinion, written by Judge Kevin Newsom and joined by Judge Britt Grant, said, quote, Florida Preborn has provided uncontradicted testimony that buffer zones effectively have been stifling sidewalk counselors and their ability to distribute literature to patients entering and exiting the clinic. Judge Nancy Abudu dissented, saying the city has an interest in providing safe and unobstructed access in the driveway for vehicles. On Tuesday, Florida is scheduled to execute Mark Gerald's amidst the deadliest year of executions in the state's history. But WMNF's Chris Young reports an anti-death penalty group says there's a lack of evidence in the case.
Gerald's was convicted of the murder of a Panama City Beach mother who was beaten and stabbed to death in her home. He waived all remaining appeals after his warrant was signed, leaving him with no active legal avenues to stop his own execution.
That is, to me, a flaw in the system that these men, even those with real constitutional procedural issues in their case, are, throwing up their hands and saying, I'm done.
Grace Hanna is the executive director of Floridians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. She says factors like Gerald's diagnosis of bipolar manic disorder led Gerald's not to understand his voluntary waiver. FADP also criticized forensic evidence that didn't match Gerald, and a defense counsel they say, quote, presented no defense at all. FADP contends that life without parole is an alternative to the death penalty. Various organizations will protest on the day of the execution around the state and in Pinellas County. Visit WMNF.org for details. Chris Young, WMNF News.
The Florida Supreme Court yesterday unanimously rejected an appeal filed by a death row inmate convicted in the 2010 stabbing death of a Jacksonville woman. At least in part, attorneys for David Kelsey Spar argued that his constitutional rights were violated because the jury in his case was not drawn from a fair cross-section of the community, according to the Supreme Court opinion. The opinion rejected arguments saying that while the defendants are entitled to a trial by an impartial jury chosen by a fair cross-section of the community, the U.S. Supreme Court said this right, quote, does not guarantee that the jury actually selected will always mirror the relevant community, unquote. Spar was convicted in the stabbing murder of Tiara Poole. A report by human rights organization Amnesty International calls the conditions at Everglades Detention Center, often referred to as Alligator Alcatraz, horrific and inhumane, and urged Florida to close the site. The report lists human rights violations that in some cases amount to torture at the Eastern Collier County facility. Elise Bennett is with the Center for Biological Diversity, which is among several groups suing Florida and the federal government over the site, and hailed Amnesty International and their report.
The report adds to a growing pile of evidence that this lawless detention facility is hurting people and the environment.
The report's findings were gathered during a September 2025 research mission. It concluded inmates were living in inhumane and unsanitary conditions, including overflowing toilets with fecal matter seeping into sleeping areas and lack of privacy, including cameras above the toilets.
Given these harms, we're relieved that our case is moving forward again and we can hold these rogue agencies accountable.
The report had similar findings for the Chrome North Service Processing Facility in Miami. Yesterday, Republican Senator Rick Scott issued a press release on behalf of Florida's entire congressional delegation in sending a letter to President Trump encouraging him to, quote, reject any potential plans from the Department of Interior that would violate his moratorium banning oil drilling off Florida's coast. Highs today in the mid-80s, some clouds tonight with overnight lows in the mid-60s, partly cloudy tomorrow with near record highs in the mid-80s. I'm Josh Holton with the WMNF News headlines.
This is The Scoop, recorded at WMNF Tampa.